I enjoyed that. I hope y'all did. We are kicking in today into part 2 of a series we started last week called Last Words. Because let's be honest, words are interesting. We said last week that words communicate intelligence. They communicate all the things that we need to know about life, all the things that we go to school to learn, or maybe you stay home to learn at school, or maybe you sit in a place like this and somebody like me and they pour out everything that they've learned and every bit of knowledge they have, and they push you to that place where you gain more information and more knowledge. Words are great, but words also tend to show your lack of intelligence. Now, I'm going to tell on myself a little bit here. I know this will take some of you by surprise, and it will shock some of you to know this. I am not mechanically inclined. I'm not. Engines, cars, that kind of stuff, they may as well be written in another language. I just don't know really. I know that when I turn the key, there's something that happens and it sparks something in the engine and makes something go down and another thing go up and it makes the engine go. And I know that without oil and gas, the engine will explode. But several years ago, I was talking to one of my stepbrothers, and we were talking about cars. We were talking about what kind of car we wanted when we got older, and he just loved stick shift. He loved sticks, and I'd never driven a stick, and I like automatics. I like being able to get in. I don't have to think about whether or not I'm changing gears or gonna, I like to know that when I push the gas pedal, it's just gonna do it. I like to know that the transmission thingy is gonna do what it's supposed to do. And I told him, I said, you know what kind of car I want? He said, what? I said, I want a standard automatic. Some of you in here that are car people, you're looking at me going, really? A standard is a stick shift, and then there's an automatic. They're not, you can't have, it won't do both. I didn't know that. And he looked at me and was like, huh? Like, yeah, I want a standard automatic. He's kind of made this like face and kind of went on about his business. The thing is we come in contact with people all the time who use their words to either to show us how intelligent they are, how smart they are, show us how unintelligent they are. And then we have things that we like to call, famous last words. The last words that people say just before they do something that either makes them extremely famous for a good reason or something extremely famous for a bad reason. One of my favorite ones was said by Karl Marx. If you know who that is, great for you. If you don't, Karl Marx was the founder of Marxism. And on his deathbed, one of his servants who had been with his family for years and years and years and years and years came in and said, do you have any last words of wisdom that you want to pass on? And Marx looked at her and said, last words are for people who haven't spoken enough. It's like, wow. It's kind of interesting thought. Last words are for people who haven't already said enough. Last words make us stop, and sometimes they make us shake our head and go, what in the world were they doing? What were they thinking? Kind of like, here, hold my cup. Or they make us stop and they make us look inside of ourselves. They make us laugh. They make us take a good long look at life itself, or even at what we're doing with ourselves, the way that we portray ourselves and we live our lives. And we talked last week, we started this whole thing off with this understanding that Jesus' words on the cross were no different. These words, some of the words that Jesus spoke on the cross had the potential to do every single one of those things. They had the potential to make us stop and look at ourselves and look at the way that we approach life in general, to look at the way that people around us, that we interact with them, and the way that we look at the way we handle the people in our lives and the people that we come in contact with. Jesus' words on the cross were exactly that. And when you take Karl Marx's response about what last words are, it's no wonder to me that Jesus had some last words to say, because Jesus wasn't done speaking to us. He had more that he wanted us to know. And last week, we started this whole thing off by looking at one of the phrases that he said. And as it was kind of unfolding, we had this picture between two different things, this idea of selfishness and selflessness. The selfishness was completely embodied by the fact that the soldiers that were there were casting lots. They were gambling, trying to win souvenirs of what was going on. This was a monstrous day in the life of Israel. Here's this person who's been changing the way people face each other, the way they interact with each other, the way they love each other, the way they live their lives. He had become a rock star. He was the top celebrity of the day. And here he was being executed. Think about it in terms like this. Every single day across the world, there are auction houses that auction things off that were owned by or belonged to famous people or families of famous people. And they auction off for hundreds of thousands and sometimes even tens of millions of dollars. And so these guys are sitting around the foot of the cross and they're like, oh, wait a minute, this is an amazing piece of clothing here. It's all one piece. And we don't want to split it up, so let's just cast lots to see who's going to win it. So these guys are sitting there completely oblivious to what's going on. And on the other side of it, you have Jesus sitting there hanging on the cross, completely focused on something totally different. And we looked in John chapter 19, verses 26 and 27, and we saw this. As when Jesus saw his mother and the disciple that he loved standing nearby, he said to his mother, "Woman, behold your son." And then he looked at the disciple and he said, "Behold your mother." And from that hour, the disciple took her to his own home. And it's not said here, but it's implied that he cared for her for the rest of her life. See, for us, we look at this and we go, well, now, wait a minute now. Why? This is weird. Like, well, you're right. It is kind of an odd thing. You know, here Jesus is on the verge of dying, and he's looking at the people around him and going, okay, listen, mom, woman, here's your new son. I'm giving you a new son. And John, the disciple that I love, here's your mom. Here's your mother. Well, why did they do this? We talked about it last week. In Jewish culture, the eldest son was responsible for the mother in case of the father's death, which lends itself to the belief that at some point during Jesus' life, his father Joseph, his earthly father, had passed away, and now he was caring for Mary. And so he did the only thing that a good son would have done. He looked at someone else and said, I need you to take care of her. Well, why didn't he go to his siblings? Because they didn't believe he was who he was. Earlier in the chapter, it says that they looked at him and said, no, we don't buy it. So Jesus did what every good son in a Jewish community would have done. He made sure that his mom was taken care of. And we ended with this point, that the bottom line of the whole thing is that the depth of our faith is shown when we serve our family. What do we learn from Jesus right here on the cross before he dies? We learn that the true test of our faith is shown when we serve our families. When the timing is bad, when it's hard, when it's difficult, when they don't appreciate it, all of those things. The true test of your faith and what you believe about Jesus is shown when you serve your family. Now, if you're like me, you look at this and at some point you go, now wait a minute, that's easy for Jesus. It's easy for Jesus to do that. I mean, after all, he was Jesus. The man walked on water. He made a small, tiny lunch feed more than 5,000 people. He made blind people see. He made dead people come back to life. He made deaf people be able to hear. He made people who were out of their minds sane again. He was Jesus. It was easy for him to do that. He was God. Jesus said over and over again, if you've seen the Father, you've seen me, because I and the Father are one. He was God. Of course, it was easy for him. He knew what he was getting into. He knew the finished product. He knew what was going to happen. He knew the ending of the story. So he knew in the end everything was going to be okay. And to that, my response is rubbish. Think about this for a second. How many times have you watched your favorite movie over and over again? How many times have you read your favorite book from cover to cover and then turned it and started it all over again? How many times have you listened to the same song on repeat for months at a time? How many times have you gotten into your car and driven from point A to point B? How many times have you sat down to start preparing a meal knowing you were going to sit down and eat the most delicious thing you've ever eaten in your life? The reality is this: knowing the ending changes nothing. It doesn't. Because when we watch our favorite movie, we still have those same emotions that run through us. We still cry. We know we're going to cry like a baby. We know we're going to sit back and go, oh, now I want to be a fighter pilot. Or now you look at it and go, now see, this is the reason why I want to be a doctor. Or you look at it and go, this is the reason why I wanted to be a parent. This is the reason why I wanted to be a pastor. This is the reason why I wanted to do this or this. Or you read a book and you sit down and you finish and you know, oh my goodness, this is the reason why I want to be a writer. We still cry, we still celebrate, we still get encouraged, we still hang on every single word. We look at and walk through the entire experience over and over and over again. What makes this so powerful is the fact that from the beginning, Jesus did know the outcome. He knew what was going to happen. In Matthew chapter 20, verse 28, it says this, Jesus is talking, he says, even as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. He knew what was coming. He knew he was going to go to the cross. He knew he was going to die. That was the entire purpose he came, and he knew it every step of the way. He could have ended it right there. That could have been his last words. I said, now, here's what I'm going to say. I didn't come to be served, but I came to serve and to offer myself as a ransom to many. So now you guys go serve other people. And left it at that. But he waited for his last words until he was on the cross. One of the next things that Jesus says is actually found in John chapter 19, verse 28. It says, after this, Jesus, knowing that all was now finished, once he had reached the end of everything that was going on, he had finally taken the weight of the world on his shoulders. He turns and he looks at whoever is nearby and he says, I thirst. And it says this was said to fulfill the scripture. That particular scripture, that prophecy is actually found in the book of Psalms. It says he did that specifically for this, so that people would know this is happening. It was already foretold. You know the end of the story. The Messiah is here. I am him. And now, he could have stopped there. He could have stopped there and let that be the end of the story. But he didn't. If you have a Bible, go ahead and turn to the book of Matthew, chapter 27. If you don't have it with you, it's okay. It'll be up on the screen. But this whole process is unfolding, and Jesus is on the cross. And he's sitting there, and all this stuff is starting to unfold. And it says, now, this is in verse 45, now from the 6th hour, there was darkness over all the land until the 9th hour. Okay, well, now what time of day is this? Now, the Jewish calendar, the Jewish day started typically from the time that the sun came up until the sun went down. It's about a 12-hour period. So this is during about the 6th hour of the day. Okay? And so he's sitting there, and this is late in the afternoon. The sun is at the highest peak it should possibly be at. And the day is starting to wind down. And out of nowhere, darkness covers the entire land. Everything goes dark. It's as if the sun has been completely blotted out. They're experiencing some version of a solar eclipse, people say. Could it possibly be that creation itself and the earth itself, knowing what was coming, was preparing itself to grieve and mourn? But it had nothing compared to what Jesus was about to experience. It says about the 9th hour, Jesus cried out with a loud voice. And he says this, Eli, Eli, lema sabachthani, which is translated to say, my God, why have you forsaken me? In this moment, we see Jesus throw these words out. And he's in distress. Okay? He's in physical and emotional distress. He's in total darkness. And he feels like God is absolutely nowhere to be found. See, there's two words here that are important. The first one is the Greek word that's used when it says that he cried out, and it's the word boao, which means to make an urgent distress call. To summon someone intensely because you are sorely needing a response. Or assistance. And so Jesus cries out with this voice because he needs something. He needs help. He needs assistance. He needs to know what's going on. He is in the darkest moment of his life. He is in distress like you cannot believe. And he cries out, my God, why have you forsaken me? This literally means, why have you left me? Where did you go? Why have you gone? Jesus was so used to having the Father with him every step of the way. And now God is nowhere to be seen. Sound familiar? If you're human, this is immensely familiar to you. Because all of us have experienced moments in time where we are in the absolute lowest place we could ever be. And we feel like we are in complete and total darkness. We can't see where we're going. We can't see where we're supposed to walk. We can't see where our next step is supposed to be. We're worried that if we take another step, we're going to trip and fall flat on our face and be hurt worse than we already are. And we feel like God is nowhere to be seen. We cry out to God, and all we get back is silence. If you're human, you've been there. I've been there. In this moment, Jesus lays out and gives us an example of something that is so unbelievably powerful and yet so unbelievably difficult to do. He cries out, "Where are you? I can't see you. I can't hear you. I can't feel you." And he sets the example for his apostles, his disciples, and all the people standing there to say, seek God. Especially when life gets hard. Seek God, especially when life gets hard. See, Jesus had already foreshadowed this way back in the very beginning of the book of Matthew. See, in Matthew chapter 7, verse 7, he says, "Ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find." Knock and it'll be open to you. In that moment in his life, he was experiencing something that he had never, ever, ever, ever could have imagined what it would have felt like. And for us, like when we talk about life getting hard, it looks different for everybody because what's hard for you right now, what may be the hardest moment of your life will look completely different for you than it will for me. As you get older, the depth of those harder places gets so much deeper and so much harder to navigate because you have connections that you never had when you were younger. Moments you find yourself in because of the things that you've done, the decisions that you've made. You find yourself at rock bottom and you go, now what? Jesus says, seek God. Look for him. And don't stop looking for him until you find him. Because when you find him, you will realize it only gets better from here. When you feel like the weight of the world is on you and you can't breathe, what do? You seek God. When you wake up one morning and you look around and you go, I have no job to go to. Yesterday I did. What do? You seek God. And you say, God, now where do I go? And you keep looking until he shows you, God, I just don't want it today. What do? You seek God. You remind yourself that he is exactly who he says he is. I read something earlier this week, and I want to read this to you. It's very, very simple. This is found in the very, very last verse. It's the very, very last verses of the book of John. It says, this is the disciple who's bearing witness about these things and who has written these things, and we know that his testimony is true. This is being dictated by the eyewitness, by the person who saw it and experienced it. It says, Now, there are also many other things that Jesus did. If every one of them were to be written, I suppose the world itself could not contain the books that would be written. Why did he write it? So that we could see specifically who Jesus was and understand exactly who he was. I've written these words so that all who hear them may believe. Jesus told his disciples, he said, listen, I want you to understand something. Where I'm going, you can't follow me right now. But know this, I will never leave you or forsake you. I'll never leave your side. I'll never abandon you. I'll never walk away. In these moments, God is closer than you think he is. All you have to do is stop and look for him. I get it. It's easier said than done. I know that. How do I know that? Because in my deepest moments of loss, people would say the same thing to me. You just need to pray. You need to have faith. You need to just believe. You don't want to hear those things. But it's true. Jesus sets the example on the cross. God, I can't see you. Where are you? I need you. You seek God, especially when life gets hard. Now, I have no idea what some of you are facing. I have no idea what rough times you're going through. Some of you, I absolutely do. And while I can't imagine being in some of your shoes, Jesus can. In just a minute, the band is going to come, and they're going to play a song. And I'm not going to challenge you to make any kind of response. I'm not going to challenge you to do anything extraordinary or out of the ordinary. I just want you to ask God to do one thing. And it's this: to show you where he is. Because if we're not careful, we stop looking for him. Father, thank you for loving us and challenging us and pushing us and encouraging us and driving us. Thank you for making yourself available to us. God, my prayer is that whatever situations are represented in this room, whatever darkness, whatever heartache, whatever discouragement there is, I pray that you will open our eyes to see you where you are. And I pray that our cry would simply become, just give me Jesus. Help us to see you and to know that you love us. In Jesus' name, amen.